"The vat is ready, Overseer." The words hung in the air, heavy with the scent of iron-scrubbed oxygen. Krelthax, his 8 spindly limbs twitching against the console, did not look up. He watched the subabyssal basin through the reinforced glass, his compound eyes shifting from a dull amber to a sharp, predatory violet. The Class 9 raw toxtrial had claimed the lives of every cadet cohort for the last 4 cycles, and today's harvest promised to be just as efficient as the last. Krelthax had calibrated the toxin density himself, ensuring that no known biological frame could survive the initial intake. He checked the pressure seals one last time, his mandate clear: test the limits of the galaxy's elite and purge those who failed. They thought the liquid was a test of willpower, but it was designed to liquefy anything with a pulse. In the observation deck, representatives from the Xyloth and Kren star systems stood in rigid lines, their armor polished, their sensors humming in the cold light. They waited to watch the next generation of Apex soldiers prove their worth, oblivious to the fact that they were merely witnessing a graveyard in the making. The board of directors expected a total failure rate. Krelthax was ready to provide it. The air in the room was stale, recycled, and entirely devoid of hope. He adjusted his focus, waiting for the inevitable signal of termination. Ilara sat at the edge of the line, her posture relaxed, her eyes focused on the dull gray of her boots. Beside her, 9 elite Xyloth and Kren warriors stood in perfect formation, their expensive, chrome-plated neural links pulsing with diagnostic data. They were the galaxy's finest, yet they looked like children waiting for an executioner. Ilara tapped her silver tin, the sound echoing like a rhythmic pulse in the silence. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small, frayed notebook, and began scribbling notes about the ventilation speed and the pressure drop in the intake pipes. She did not look at the basin. She did not check her scanner. She just counted the seconds until the cycle reached its peak intensity. The technician initiated the intake cycle. A thick, iridescent sludge, saturated with neurotoxins at 99.8% on the K-scale, began to fill the basin. The elite cadets stepped forward, their bioscanners set to optimal, their confidence absolute. They breathed in the fumes, confident that their advanced physiology would filter the poison before it could take hold. They did not notice the human girl behind them, who simply held her breath and reached for a packet of synthetic salt. She checked her watch, marked the time, and leaned back against the bulkhead. She had calculated the intake speed, the pressure, and the exact concentration of the poison before the trial had even been announced. It took exactly 3 seconds. The first Xyloth cadet collapsed, his internal structure liquefying as the toxin breached his outer membrane. Beside him, 2 Kren warriors stiffened, their nervous systems overloading in a violent, spasming frenzy. They hit the deck like falling pillars. One after another, the elite cadre buckled, their lungs turning to slurry, their hearts stopping in rhythmic unison. The basin turned a dark, sickening shade of crimson as the last of the apex species succumbed to the liquid death. The monitors chirped with frantic warnings that went ignored by the dead. Krelthax watched the life vanish from their eyes, his only thought being the efficiency of the kill. Krelthax checked his display, his crystalline joints buzzing in smug satisfaction. He prepared his failure report. "Total loss," he clicked, his mandibles vibrating with the coldness of the vacuum. As predicted, the human, however, is still standing, curious. He zoomed the camera in. Ilara was not spasming. She was not even sweating. She was simply standing, watching the monitor with a look of mild professional disappointment. Krelthax frowned, his antennae rotating to focus on the human's vitals. The machine showed nothing but calm. He checked the sensors again. The toxin concentration was unchanged. The human was breathing. Ilara stepped back from the basin, pulling her silver tin from her jacket pocket. She shook it once, the faint metallic clink filling the room. She looked at the slumped bodies of the elite warriors and sighed, her voice projecting clearly through the comms. "I was hoping for synthetic broth, not this. It's just a little metallic on the finish, and the viscosity is completely wrong for a standard nutritional intake. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get this taste out of your mouth? I had to prep my stomach for 3 days just to be able to handle the basic acidity. And then you go and lace it with these weak neurotoxins. The observation deck went silent. Krelthax leaned over the railing, his 8 limbs locking rigid. He looked at the monitors, then back at the girl. Elara was not struggling. She was wiping her mouth with a cloth, her expression entirely bored. The medical sensor above her head blinked a steady, infuriating green. Her heart rate was 42 beats per minute, perfectly consistent with a light morning exercise. The board members exchanged worried glances, their own confidence faltering as they realized their apex heroes had been outdone by a human logistics cadet. They hadn't planned for this. They hadn't even considered the possibility. "How?" Krelthax whispered, his antennae drooping. He triggered the secondary diagnostic, certain that the machine had malfunctioned. He keyed in the manual override, forcing the system to rescan the human's blood composition. The result remained identical. He watched the data scroll past, his own reality beginning to fray. The human's blood was not just resisting, it was breaking down the toxin into harmless amino acids. It was an efficiency he had only read about in theoretical papers on Deathworld survivors. Elara didn't answer. She was busy cleaning her fingernails with a small, sharpened tool. Human baseline acidity naturally neutralizes the vat's neurotoxin, she said, her voice dry, almost apologetic. I told the logistics officer that your math was flawed. You forgot to account for basic human indigestion. We've been eating far worse things for thousands of years. This vat is essentially just a mild chemical cleanser to us. You really should look into stronger compounds if you want to actually test us. The monitors flashed red, an alert meant for total system failure. Krelthax stared at the screen, his compound eyes dilated. The display showed 9 elite warriors in ICU state, contrasted against a small, dusty human who was just annoyed by the aftertaste. He realized, with a cold shiver, that their standardized metrics were useless. His 42 years of experience had just been rendered obsolete by a girl who packed her own seasoning and kept notes on the airflow. The room felt suddenly very small, very fragile, and very wrong. He was looking at a superior biology, and he was too arrogant to admit it until it was far too late. "Lock it down," Krelthax hissed, his voice cracking. "Prevent all outgoing data. If the board sees this, we are all finished." He lunged for the control panel, but his joints were still buzzing with the feedback of the trial's failure. He couldn't think. He couldn't act. He just watched. The entire infrastructure of the academy was predicated on the assumption that humans were soft, brittle, and easily managed. That assumption had just been shattered, and with it, the foundation of his entire world. The emergency protocols engaged, sealing the observation deck in an impenetrable shield. But the data had already been cached. Krelthax stood alone in the flickering red light, his career dissolving faster than the cadets in the basin. He had spent his life believing that apex was a metric of strength, only to discover it was a metric of ignorance. The girl had not been fighting. She had been surviving a standard Tuesday. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't the master of the trial anymore. He was the subject, and the human girl was simply waiting for the next turn. Elara was escorted out by 2 trembling guards who refused to look her in the eye. She walked past the control board, stopped for a moment, and left the small silver tin on the ledge. Krelthax watched it, his crystalline joints finally still. The silence in the room was heavier than the toxic fumes had ever been. He knew, as the lights dimmed, that the academy would never be the same. The humans weren't just here to participate. They were here to redefine the rules. Every wall, every sensor, every protocol had been built on a lie, and the girl had just pulled the thread that would unravel it all. "You cannot train for what you don't understand, Overseer," Elara remarked softly as she passed. The echo of her voice lingered in the halls, a quiet, terrifying reminder of the variable they had ignored. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The data spoke for itself, and the board would have to face the music whether they liked it or not. The trial was over, but the consequence was only beginning. The overseer looked at the empty screen, then at his own trembling limbs, and knew that the order he had built was already gone. By dawn, the Academy had issued a new directive, human nullification, a desperate attempt to patch the holes in their doctrine. The silver tin was placed in the exhibit case, its contents still slightly bitter to the touch. The galaxy remained vast, but Krelthax knew the truth now. It rarely accounted for human grit. The trial had been a failure, but the lesson was permanent. The humans had arrived, and they weren't going to play by the rules anymore. The tin sat on the velvet, dark and cold. Beside it, a single grain of salt caught the light.